You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam. Streaming on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Hey everybody, it's episode 104 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, with me, as he has been for the prior 103 episodes. It's my good brother and good friend, Liam. Liam, we are starting a new month here at the DCAU Review, and with that, we are returning to the future.
The future, Cal?
That's right, Liam. All the way to the year 2000. Well, technically, I guess 1999, but that doesn't fit with the old Conan O'Brien bit. So we are, of course, returning to the world of Batman Beyond, and we are picking back right up where we left off with the second season episode, Rats.
Yes, and what a return.
We commented as the last time that we were reviewing Batman Beyond that there had been a shift sort of in the tone and the style at some point, and that the storylines were going to be geared a little bit more towards Terry and his high school surroundings, and this somewhat plays into that. But boy, is this an interesting episode. Before we get into discussing plot and the rest of our categories, let us get the official IMDb synopsis for Rats, which aired on Kids WB back in November 20th to be exact, 1999. Liam.
Yes, and I have the synopsis here. It's one of the longest ones to date, I think.
Wow.
And for this episode of all episodes. And yes, this is the synopsis for the episode Rats, which was written by Rich Fogel, directed by Kurt Gaeta, with music by Shirley Walker. And that synopsis reads as such. Terry and Dana's relationship is strained when Terry's Batman duties get in the way of their relationship. After receiving a flower, Dana believes it's from Terry, but soon comes to realize it's from an unexpected stalker with some unexpected friends. All
right. Well, that unexpected is a way to say it. The first thing that I'll throw out there is that this episode is ridiculous. This is, and you can tell from the get-go, this is going to be a ridiculous episode because it is literally named what the main antagonist is. That is Rats. So we start off with Dana and I believe it's Chelsea. Is that the girl that's?
Yes, that's the short-haired blonde friend.
Okay. Chelsea and then, of course, Max are all at a table watching a news report talking about Gotham's, quote, secret shame, unquote, that being giant man-eating rats. And oh boy, is it a roller coaster ride from there, Liam.
Well, that's part of it as we get into a plot here. Like, part of this episode is that Dana has the secret admirer, and at first she thinks it's Terry leaving her the flowers. But then we see, like, things moving in the shadows and people watching her, and, like, you spelled out what it was, but there's not any real mystery to who it is, because you spelled out in the first 10 seconds of the episode and by the episode's name that it's going to be giant rats. So, like, there's a weird amount of mystery in the first half of this. It's
very much done like a psychological thriller or horror movie where a teenage girl is being stalked in the shadows, as you mentioned, by an unknown assailant. But yeah, it's really no mystery. The thing that I really appreciated about this episode, maybe the only thing I appreciated about this episode, is that it would be Exhibit A in any sort of court case against trying to prove Terry is the world's worst boyfriend, as we have been preaching for many, many, many episodes that we've reviewed of Batman Beyond here, that hashtag Dana deserves better. But if we were to write an episode in order to sell the stickers that we had printed up that say Dana deserves better on them, I don't think we could have come up with a better episode than this.
Yeah. So, and that's almost therein lies the problem, because as silly as the plot is, and as kind of dumb as the villain is, like, if there was a better, like, resolution to this whole thing with Terry and Dana at the end of this, I think I would forgive it a little bit more. But instead, Terry, because Dana has this traumatic experience where she's kidnapped and has to fight off giant rats, she just forgives Terry at the end of the episode and they walk off together. It's like, if this had been like a big monumental thing and like at the end he tells her he's Batman, or or you go the Spider-Man route and he breaks up with her because he feels that, you know, he's not being fair to her. Okay. Then at least at the end of all of this, there was like a point. And we've talked about this with episodes in the past, but at the end, you generally want the characters to be different at the end, even if it's in some small way, than they were at the beginning of the journey. And in this episode, they quite literally go right back to where they were. Like, Terry's still going to be standing Dana up for dates, but he's not as bad as the creepy rat boy who kidnapped her, so I guess he's all right.
Yeah, they did that thing where they highlight a huge issue. Like, this has clearly been an issue, that Terry's a deadbeat boyfriend that isn't there for her. He's falling asleep in the club. He's, you know, he's a bad boyfriend. Yes. And they highlight that. I loved, actually, so Dana's dad, Mr. Tan, makes an appearance here, his one and only appearance in the series, and he even verbatim says, "Dana, you could do so much better."
Bye, Dad.
Study group tonight?
No, I'm meeting Terry. Dad.
Dana, I wish you weren't seeing that boy. He's been in trouble. He's got a record.
That was a long time ago, Dad. He's got a job now. He's really trying to make good.
But you could do so much better.
Like, verbatim says that. And as you said, they highlight it. They put this giant spotlight on it. And the funny thing is, she doesn't even have any sort of Stockholm Syndrome-esque type feelings when this boy who does pay her attention. Like, I'm not saying that she should be happy that this boy kidnapped her by any means. Like, by all means, this person that appears to be very rat-like, who has rats for friends, kidnapped her and dragged her to the sewers. But at least at the beginning, there was this, like, oh, he's being sweet and giving me these weird underground roses that he's created. But there's not even a hint of Stockholm Syndrome there. She's immediately revolted and wants to leave him. So it's almost like you've taught Dana that she doesn't think she can do any better. Like, she has this like just terrible self-esteem problem where she feels like she has to pick between a rat guy that has kidnapped her. Well, I can't go with that guy because he's creepy and weird and he looks like a rat. So, and he has rats for friends. And his idea of a meal is licorice and what was the other thing? Beef jerky or something? Yes. Turkey jerky, something like that. Like, okay, I guess I just have to stay with Terry. Like, no, she should at the end say, you guys both suck and I don't want to have anything to do with you guys, like, at all. But that's not what happened.
No, unfortunately it's not. And it's just frustrating because, again, it feels like there should be a big moment at the end of this, because they do. There's like a sequence near the end of the episode where she tries to escape, and they kind of show that she's kind of capable of fending for herself, although she does end up getting taken back. But then as Terry arrives as Batman to save her at the end, he's kind of overwhelmed by the giant rats, and she actually, using some ingenuity, creates like a torch out of a hockey stick and actually helps him fight off the rats. And it's like, this moment, we're like, all right, like there's a little bit more to Dana. She's not just the damsel here. But then at the end, she's just sitting on the police car with a blanket on her shoulders, and Terry comes up and they just walk off together. It's like, man, that's we took the wrong lessons from this story.
All right, there's two things that you mentioned that I want to address here that were also huge plot holes for me. And then I can talk about the only thing that I really did appreciate in this episode. So two huge plot holes or two issues that I have with the plot. First of all, they sort of pseudo address where these giant rats have come from. There's a mysterious gigantic nuclear waste dump underneath next to where this rat boy lives, of course. And it's, I guess that's sort of a wink and a nod to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What do you think?
Yeah, that makes as much sense as anything.
Okay, obviously there's a giant anthropomorphic rat in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles also. So my second thought is there's not really an explanation for why Patrick looks like a rat. Like, he just says he resembles a rat, but he has like rat colored skin and giant rat ears also. So it's like they went halfway with this thing. Like, they didn't want to make him a mutant rat boy that has mutant rat friends. He's just a guy that was unfortunately born, I guess, with the same like killer croc disease. Like, they could have if they even like tied it into that with like, it's the same disease, or as a result of like his parents splicing before they had him or something like that. Right. I don't know. Like, tie this into something that matters, but none of it matters.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because as we mentioned, we meet Patrick, and he's immediately off-putting to her and is telling her she can't leave and is offering her jelly beans with cockroaches in them. And then, and then he immediately turns sort of angry with her when she tries to leave at the end. And that's really the only development we get for him. And it's like, how did he train the rats?
Yeah, we didn't get that either.
Okay, we understand the rats are giant rats, and perhaps the toxic waste also makes them more like dogs because he is like teaching them to fetch and stuff. My other thing with the plot that I wanted to mention, and I know you had another point, so I'll let you get back to it in a moment here, but there's like a moment where there's absolutely no reason that Patrick ever has to go out with the giant rats.
Right.
Because they can clearly fetch whatever he wants without him, as they do when they bring Dana to him. And yet he goes with them to get the chili for the express purpose so that he can say, I have to get back to Dana within earshot of Batman, so that Batman knows that he's the guy who has Dana.
Right. Yeah, that I picked up on that too. Like, the only reason, I mean, Terry had this suspicion that because he went back to the place and it was spicy chili or whatever, he comments that Dana likes her. But of course, like, there more than one person in the world likes the spicy chili. But yeah, if he hadn't, it's all happenstance, where if he hadn't heard Patrick say that, then he wouldn't have known that this guy had anything to do with her disappearance. Yeah, I think the only part that I appreciated, other than Dana's father taking it to Terry and really honestly ripping him a deserved new one, would be the introduction of reoccurring character Mad Stan to the Batman Beyond universe.
Blow it all up!
Yeah, he's this weird sort of... It's also funny because this is his first appearance in the series, but Bruce Wayne mentions specifically Mad Stan is back. So I like that for one reason, because I like the idea that even when we're not watching, Terry is off having these adventures and meeting villains and stuff like that. So I thought that was fine. But it's interesting, yes, that he's just this weird, like, anarchist guy who is angry at the government and the system and wants to blow everything up. I guess he's like a meathead version of the Anarchy Batman villain.
Yes. Like,
he's just super... But there's also, like, this throwaway line where, as he's beating the tar out of Batman, making Terry late for his date, where Bruce Wayne's like, careful, the more he rants, the stronger he gets, something. I was like, so he's like tirade Hulk, where the more worked up he gets about like the surveillance state, the stronger he is.
Yeah, I did notice that too. I was like, does that mean he's like a is that a superpower that he has? Because it's not really, I mean, it's not really mentioned that he's like what Static would call like a bang baby or like a metahuman of any kind. So there's no reason to believe that he has any superpowers. So yeah, that throwaway line is just his rage. His rage is limitless.
But that's the thing though. If he just said like he gets stronger when he gets mad, I'd be like, all right, whatever, fine. But specifically, he's like, don't let him get off on a rant. He becomes unstoppable. And I'm like, what?
That's so good.
What does that mean?
There's so much subtle commentary that applies to today's, honestly. Like, I did appreciate Mad Stan's talk about how people were inundated with too much information.
Information overload, man. As a society, we're drowning in a quagmire of vid clips, email, and sound bites. We can't absorb it all. There's only one sane solution. Blow it up.
And they can't process it all with their brains or something. I was like, This is straight out of somebody's Twitter rant. Like, this is absolutely somebody's Twitter rant, like taken from the future and brought to the past for this 1999 Batman Beyond script. And then
Batman of only doing what he does for the clout, although he doesn't use that word. That's a 2020 word, but
right, yeah. And then you have shades of incel in Patrick, Patrick the Rat Boy. So it's I mean, that part, at least I could pull things from that. And so, all right, this is entertaining or interesting, but it was a struggle to get through this episode. I gave this episode a 2 out of 10 for plot. What about you?
Yeah, I'm in that same ballpark. I went 3 out of 10. Not a great day at the office for the Batman Beyond crew on this one. And again, like I think there's a way where either you eliminate the Rat Boy kidnaps Dana part of this, and it's just like a series of almost like little vignettes of Terry fighting different villains and constantly being late and keep screwing things up with Dana, and then you do your resolution at the end where he finally makes it, or he doesn't and she breaks up with him, whatever you decide to do. Or you go full in on the Rat Boy side of it. And again, like I think this episode needed to end for it to be worth it, with like him carrying her out of the sewers and taking off his mask and saying, I'm Batman, that's why I'm a terrible boyfriend.
Right.
And we didn't get either of that.
Terry didn't learn anything from this episode, literally. He didn't learn anything. He didn't learn that his Batman is constantly going to get in the way of his relationship. He didn't learn that he wants a relationship more than he wants to be Batman. There was absolutely no movement at all. I honestly thought about just start doing the intro here, playing the clip of the news guy talking about the giant rats, and then playing Dana's clip to end it, and just ending this episode because it's quite frustrating. All right, so why don't we move on to our next category, Liam, visuals and animation. Let's talk a little bit about this. There are at least some interesting things to see in this episode. What do you think about visuals?
Yeah, I will say I think despite that we don't get a good explanation for why he looks that way, I think the Patrick Rat Boy design is interesting. Sort of invokes the original movie vampire Nosferatu a little bit.
Okay, there you go.
And also maybe a little bit of the kind of the very old Bat Boy, which is like a really old tabloid news story. If you just Google Bat Boy, it's like you'll come up. It was this weird tabloid, like think like heyday of the National Enquirer and all those things that you see in newspapers, kids, used to be the thing. And there were so many newspapers that there got to be like one might call fake news in the form of a magazine, and it would be at the checkout market at the supermarket as you were checking out. In the lane there would be these magazines with these outrageous claims and silly stories, and Bat Boy is sort of a legendary one of that, and I think he's sort of a mishmash of that. So I liked the Patrick design. There's a scene when Dana's trying to escape, where she's confronted by a bunch of regular rats, and she's just kind of staring into the dark, and then all of the red eyes of the rats open, and I thought that was very clever and horror movie-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I like Mad Stan. He's just this big jacked up dude with a weird haircut and these little bombs that he can stick onto everything, including one where he sticks a bomb onto Batman's face.
That was awesome.
Spinning him around. I thought that was very, very clever.
Yeah, there was another visual where they're fighting in a library because Stan wants to blow up the library, and there's a bookcase that separates them, and he reaches through the bookcase and grabs Batman by the head and pulls him towards him, slamming Batman's face and head through the bookcase. It was really a violent but entertaining visual. I thought visuals obviously were the most interesting thing about this. I concur. I think that the rat designs are interesting. If you're going to have, the joke for years has been that New York City has rats the size of dogs. So if you're going to do that, then yeah, they should be the size of dogs, I guess. If nuclear waste is going to mutate them, they're going to be the size of actual dogs. And I actually thought I kept an eye on it. They did a pretty good job of keeping things in scale. For some reason, I had thought that they had an issue with scaling throughout this episode, where sometimes they look bigger and smaller, but they actually did a pretty good job of keeping them pretty much the same size throughout. So that was good. I did catch a couple of Easter egg visuals in here that I wanted to mention. Mm-hmm. So Terry rides the subway in this episode, or the Sky Subway, or whatever it is.
Yes.
He's sort of on his way to his date with Dana when he gets the call from Bruce. He's sitting next to the man that he actually saves at the beginning of Hidden Agenda. From the Joker's crew, there's a man also in the Sky Subway. So the guy apparently still riding the Sky Subway. I think he makes a couple appearances in additional episodes later on. But that was the same guy there. I thought that was pretty interesting. There's also a little cameo from Magma from the Terrific Trio.
Yes.
Which we covered that episode back in the archives at DCAUreview.com. Check that one out. But he mentions that he collects. Patrick does, that he collects things that no one wants anymore, and he pulls out this Magma figure out of his bag. So clearly the Terrific Trio merchandise is no longer a hot selling commodity. And there was also what I believe was a Beppo the Super Monkey toy, which we have not covered the episode just yet, and Superman the Animated Series, but I believe Lois Lane had a toy monkey in that episode.
Yes.
And
Monkey Fun is the episode.
Yes, Monkey Fun. That same monkey toy makes a brief cameo also in Patrick's collection. So some neat little callbacks there in his collection there. Not as many as I would have liked to at least distract me from this terrible story. But that, and honestly, I thought that the final fight with Terry and the giant rats and Dana getting involved, as you mentioned, with the hockey stick and burning bear, who may or may not have been Barbara Gordon's Whoopi. I couldn't make a yes or no on that one, so I didn't quite say it. But makes this burning fire stick using the hockey stick and the burning teddy bear. I thought that was a good visual for that. This is definitely the strongest thing, I think, in the episode, besides maybe voice. But I ended up giving visuals and animation a 6 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right in that same ballpark. There's a few other things I noticed on Patrick's shelves. There is for legal reasons, definitely wasn't this, but I think there was a toy Death Star on his shelf.
Nice.
And there's also appeared to be a doll of what appeared to be the DC Comics villain Chemo, depending on how you pronounce that.
Uh-huh.
So there's a few other little nods like that, but yeah, there was and yeah, as you mentioned, that final scene once the explosions are going off and it's Batman carrying Dana and basically trying to outrun the explosion with all the flames coming behind him. I thought that was a very, very well put together sequence, and as they burst out of the manhole cover and the fire comes up behind him and all of that, I thought that was really, really well done as well.
Yeah. What was your final score?
It was a 6 out of 10.
6 out of 10. All right, same score for that one. Very good. All right, let's move on to music, Liam. As you mentioned, Shirley Walker did the music for that, which makes a lot of sense because now step back for a second. I'm going to get on my soapbox again. Mentioned a couple of weeks ago when we were reviewing the Justice League Unlimited episode for The Man Who Has Everything that I'm really irritated that La La Land Records and WB have not put out the soundtracks for either of these two series available to stream, download, buy on CD, because it really hampers the ability to really, especially with these particular soundtracks, to really hone in and listen, in my opinion, to the idiosyncrasies of the soundtrack. Yes. Otherwise, it kind of just, unless it's very unique, it just kind of blends into the background a lot, which is what I found happened for me in this episode. What did you think of music?
Yeah, I think there's two standout things, which is, again, we keep going back to that Mad Stan scene. But I thought it's completely different, even though, yes, there's a lot of electric guitars and rock music. He has like this really over the top, probably the only thing comparable would be like when Lobo shows up in Superman the Animated Series, where it's like just a super rocked up, like, hardcore, like 80s metal rock theme when he walks in the room, and and I think that fit the Mad Stan character very well. And then, yes, there's a music just briefly right before Terry goes into the chilly place and confronts Patrick and the rats as he's sort of flying through the city and he's looking around. I noticed there was kind of some nice quieter music in that moment as well. But yeah, as you mentioned, when you're not able to really kind of isolate that soundtrack, it really and in this episode it seems especially a lot of the music was sort of meant to sort of blend in and sort of just be part of the atmosphere rather than pulling focus the way some of the more traditional great villain themes have in some of our other series that we've talked about. But yeah, so I mean, I thought there's nothing wrong with the music. Like I said, I really did enjoy the music in the Mad Stan fight. So I gave music a 6 out of 10.
All right, and I am fairly close to there. I went with a 5 out of 10. There was one musical note that I picked up on, and it's right when Terry and Dana are exploding out of the sewers, as you mentioned. They're outrunning this flaming explosion that happens, and after they come forth from the sewers, they land on this catwalk or on the top of this building, and there's a twinge of guitar that comes through, and I'll see if I can find it and play it right here. But it sounds very similar to the tail end of the original Batman the Animated Series theme. It's just very subtle, and it's very, very it's used very quickly. But it reminded me of that. And then when you said Shirley Walker did the music for this episode, I was like, well, I wonder if she just for kicks threw in a familiar note or two into that one to make it sound similar to a resounding Batman Triumph theme. So very interesting there. But yeah, I went 5 out of 10 for the music. That was the only real musical note that I picked up on that I thought was interesting at all. The rest of it sort of just blends into the background. Hey, by the way, La La Land Records and WB, please release these soundtracks.
Please.
Please. All right. Let's move on to our final category for the day, Liam, which is going to be voice acting. Let's talk about our voice cast for this week.
Yeah, so we have all of our regulars. We have Cree Summer briefly as Max. We have Kevin Conroy very briefly as Bruce Wayne. I think he shows up in about two scenes and is just kind of there to throw some exposition at Terry, as we mentioned about Matt Stan's super ranting powers.
Right.
And then we have, of course, we have Will Friedle as Terry, and we have Lauren Tom as Dana. This is probably the most Lauren Tom we've got in one episode so far, yes?
Yeah, I think so. She did a lot of the heavy lifting for this episode.
Yeah, and she's very good. Like,
yeah,
as much as the material, you might hear that if you listen to actors talk occasionally, you'll hear a phrase like elevate the material. And I think she does her best to make this work, and she's doing her best. I would say that.
Agree.
I think she does a good job. And then for our guest cast, we do have Clyde Kusatsu as Dana's father, which again I mostly just wanted to point out because he's like a spokesman for our hashtag Dana Deserves Better stickers, which you can buy from us.
Yeah, pick one up. Pick one up if you too believe that Dana deserves better. And Liam, I'm just going to throw this out here while we have this. I've heard rumblings that there are, and I'm not going to name them, I'm not going to call them out on this, but there are other podcasts and other DCAU fans that think that Dana sucks, that Terry belongs with 10, and that Dana is too whiny and expects too much. And I am here to tell you that could not be anything further from the truth.
It's not whiny to ask your boyfriend to show up when he says he's going to show up. That's just not what that word means.
She even like in this episode gives him grace. He's 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late or whatever. She's like, okay, I'm going to give him 5 minutes. It's okay. It's only 5 minutes. And then honestly, somebody told me that this week. They're like, you need to go and talk to these people because they're saying that Dana sucks. And I was like, they're welcome to their opinion, even if their opinion is wrong.
It's a wrong opinion. But anyway, hashtag Dana Deserves Better, and,
For sure.
And Mr. Tan knows that. We had Henry Rollins as Mad Stan,
yes,
and a pretty well-known, I think, character actor. He's one of those guys where you may not know him by name, but if you see his face, you'd probably know him. Done a lot of TV, done a lot of other voice acting. I think he's on the current Masters of the Universe reboot show that's about to be debuting soon, which also features a bunch of DCAU voice talent as well.
Absolutely.
So that's I think we've made it quite clear, I think, by this point in our episode here that Mad Stan's kind of the highlight of the show, and I think he does a great job.
Absolutely.
And then we have Taryn Noah Smith as Patrick / Rat Boy, who folks would know as the least interesting son on Home Improvement,
Not Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
Not Jonathan Taylor Thomas, and not the older one.
Okay.
The one that was like a goth for a season.
Yep. Instantly forgettable.
Yes. I think the kid on the show his name was Mark, but I'm not 100% on that.
All right.
But anyway, he's not very good. And this was also his final acting job ever, according to IMDb.
Wow.
I actually did a little bit of research about this. Apparently the story is he made his money. He didn't really enjoy acting, so he quit. And hey, good for him. Yeah. There's no rule that says you have to be an actor just because you were an actor as a child. So good for you if you get out and you find something else that you like.
Yeah, good for him. I don't disagree with you. I don't think that he was very good as a voice actor. I can't say anything for how his acting was on Home Improvement because, as we mentioned, he's a forgettable character. But he was okay, but not very convincing as Patrick / Rat Boy.
Yeah, especially I think at the end when you're doing the, his quote unquote betrayal. You needed him to kind of kick it up a notch there, and he kind of just reads all the lines in kind of the same tone of voice. So I didn't really feel anything one way or the other as he's sort of goes from this kind of goofy, sort of sad sack character into a more sinister one. Is like, all right, well, like when he's basically admitting that he has in fact is responsible, because they mention as part of this newscast at the beginning of the episode that people have been going missing. And he sort of, at the end of the episode, admits that he's kidnapped other people before Dana and fed them to his rats when they didn't want to stay.
Right.
And you need and if he had like a real sharp turn there in the voice acting department, again, a couple of the other category scores might be higher too. But unfortunately, I didn't think he was a great voice actor. Again, I don't know that there are a ton of actors that could make this a good story. But that moment where he sort of reveals at the end that, yes, in fact, he is responsible for those people going missing and he fed them to his rats. And it's just, okay, well, I'm ready for Batman to show up. Let's wrap this up.
I concur with you. All that, I assume, I don't think there's anybody else we have to talk about, right? Voice acting wise? Okay, I'm going to give my score then. I will tell you that Lauren Tom does a tremendous job, as we already mentioned.
She does, yeah.
She's really, really good, really believable as this character, really shows a wide range of emotions. She does exactly what she's asked to. She's fantastic, and she gets the majority of the score for this. Unfortunately, her score gets some points knocked off of it due to Rat Boy. So I gave it a 6 out of 10. I think Lauren Tom, like I said, she's fantastic. I think that the rest of the voice cast is just okay.
Yeah, I'm a little lower on the scale here, just because I really don't. Not again. I don't think the story would have been good, but I do think if you're gonna do a story that is dumb, you need a really hammy, over the top villain for your piece, and you have that for a couple of minutes with Mad Stan, but then we have to move on. We have to move back to Rat Boy, who is not very good. So I actually went ahead and gave voice acting a 4 out of 10.
4 out of 10. Wow. So hypothetically speaking, if we had a character that was, a collector and had to be cast, and was a person maybe that needed to be a little bit cartoony and maniacal, would you consider casting one of my top 5 greatest voice actors in the DCAU, that being Bruce Timm?
Well, he loves toys.
Yes, as heard in Beware the Grey Ghost, which of course you can hear in the archives at DCAUreview.com. Here, Liam and I argue over whether or not Bruce Timm is a good voice actor in that episode. One of the few times that we disagree with each other. All right, Liam, let's wrap this up and give our final scores. Totaling everything up here, I come up with a final score of 19 out of 40. What about you?
And in fact, adding everything up, also have a final score of 19 out of 40.
What do you know about that? Man. I don't think we even need to discuss rewatchability here. The only thing that I would say is if you have any doubt that Dana deserves better than Terry McGinnis, you should watch this episode and then stop at the point where Terry saves her from the burning building, because the fact that she jumps back into his arms really makes me angry. And at some point, you have to question her sanity. But again, maybe she just has low self-esteem.
Yeah, this is like the PSA episode where it's like, ladies, come on, you don't have to settle.
Right.
And if he's not making you happy just because he's better than a murderous rat boy does not mean he's right for you, and you don't have to settle. And that's the message I took away from this week's Batman Beyond.
I think that needs to be the clip that we put up for the preview this week.
Yeah, I think so.
You giving the PSA. I love that. All right, so do you agree with me? This is a skip?
Yeah, there's quite... they actually bring the Patrick character back in one of the tie-in comics.
Why?
For one issue of the But no, I don't think you can skip that issue of the comic, and you can skip this episode of the show.
Yeah, there's no reason. Absolutely no reason. Unless you, no, even if you just don't, even if you just have 20 minutes to waste, and you're like, what's the worst way that I can waste these 22 minutes? Like, there's 1,000 other things that you could do.
Well, the worst way, I think, historically on our show is like eternal youth or unity.
Correct.
It's not even, it doesn't even reach like the so bad it's good levels of bad. It's just not particularly enjoyable. And
correct.
I'm sad that Dana doesn't have better self-esteem.
Oh, man. Love it. All right, let's wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this week. As we've plugged several times, if you want to get yourself one of those very cool Dana Deserves Better stickers, contact us on Instagram at DCAU Review, or contact Liam at DCAU Review on Twitter. Slide into our DMs, and we'll let you know how we can get one of those to you. We'd love to get one, too. We've already gotten a couple out to a couple of DCAU Review fans. Thank you, those that have supported us. Supports us a little bit, too, in this time in a small way, so we appreciate that.
Yes.
Don't forget, you can also check Liam out on Twitter. Liam, I know you've been holding things down there on the fort. Let's talk about what do we have coming up next week for next week's episode of the DCAU Review.
Yes, and we will be continuing in the world of Batman Beyond next week and for the rest of the month of May here. And we will be picking up with the very next episode in the list here, and that is Season 2, Episode 10, Mind Games.
All right. Looking forward to that one. That's going to be good. But thanks again, everybody, for tuning in this week. Don't forget, check us out on social media. Subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, basically wherever you listen to a podcast, you can find us there. So please like, subscribe, and leave a review if you don't mind on Apple Podcasts. That helps us out immensely. Liam, anything else?
Yeah, just we've gotten a good amount of feedback, especially over the last couple months, especially, and just again, really appreciative. Again, I know times are weird, and we're glad that you've given us a chance and you're listening, and yeah, we'd like to hear your opinions as well. So definitely feel free to talk to us on Twitter or Instagram.
I would love for anybody who thinks that Dana is a bad girlfriend to tweet Liam at DCAU Review and give, but like, show your work. Like, why is she?
Yes.
Why does she suck? Should he be with Melanie and not Dana? Honestly, Terry deserves Melanie absolutely 110% because Melanie is a terrible person. But Dana is not. Dana is the salt of the earth and deserves so much better than Terry. Right. We'll leave it at that.
That's right.
Until next week, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios.